Hello, hello. Well, I think we are live right now, and I'm going to wait just a few seconds. So I'm doing my little song and dance here. But whoever's here right now, you will know that I'm a realtor, Chip McAllister, a board member, and just super excited about today because being the chair of the education committee, I got a chance to have as our special guest on our virtual safety week anybody I wanted. And the person I chose was, of course, Sheriff Don Barnes. So I'm just really excited to have him here today. And he is going to apprise us of all that's going on in the county as far as safety goes, COVID-19, crime. He's going to give us an update. And just so you know, Sheriff Barnes has been serving um, Orange County since 1989, and he just rose to the position of the sheriff in 2018. And we are super excited to have him here today. And without further ado, I will end my honor of introducing Sheriff Don Barnes and take it away. Oh, wait, before you take it away, I have to say, if you have any questions, you could type them in the chat area, the Q&A area, and we will answer them at the end. Sorry for interrupting you, Sheriff. Take it away, please.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chip, first of all, for the opportunity. Before COVID started, we had a chance. You know what? I'm going to turn my email off real quick, because if I don't, it's going to keep interrupting. So let me get rid of that real fast, if you don't mind.
Nope.
And okay, sorry about that. So yeah, thanks. And I know that before COVID and over the last several, probably years really, we've had opportunities to get together and do some pretty, I think, important training opportunities with OCR at both locations on, how cybersecurity and how to keep your neighborhood safe, how to be safe as a realtor. All those things I think are very important. And it's my privilege to be here for this conversation today, going into the safety update for you. I'm going to cover some information real quick, and then I'm going to hopefully open up to questions. So if you do have questions, as Chip mentioned, please put them in the text or chat box and send them over to him. He'll ask those later on. For those of you who aren't aware, I'll give just a little bit more background on the sheriff's office specifically, and as it pertains to my office. I'm on my 32nd year with the Sheriff's Department. I spent all my years here, but before I went into law enforcement, I did work in mortgage banking. I was back when the rates were coming down from 18.5%. Could you imagine if those existed today, how much we'd have? It would be, there'd be a rebellion. If they get to 4%, we may have a rebellion. But coming down from that, and so I did start my professional career in mortgage banking. Some of the businesses I work for don't even exist anymore. Unfortunately, they've all been consumed. But I told people, you probably heard me tell this joke before, but I wanted a less stressful job, so I went into law enforcement. I don't know if that's held true this year, because 2020, I think I'm about ready for it to be over, as probably all of us are. I don't know if I want to go back and do a do-over, because I wouldn't want to live through some of the things that we've had unless we could, of course, change the outcomes. But we are doing quite well, I believe, in the county for some of the right reasons. We may not get credit for everything we do well, but I think we're back on the right track to hopefully on towards recovery. The Sheriff's Department is a large law enforcement agency. It's the 5th largest Sheriff's Department in the nation. We run the 6th largest jail system in the nation before COVID-19. Our jail population is down to help mitigate some of the COVID-19 issues we've been dealing with in the jail. And for the most part, Orange County is a relatively safe community. We have some of the lowest crimes per capita in the nation that we're most proud of. In fact, in sheriff's jurisdiction, 9 of the 10 cities that we patrol have the lowest Part 1 crimes per capita, 9 of the 10 spots in Orange County. And so Orange County really is a very, very safe community. I shared with you before, as we were getting into COVID-19 at the beginning of the year, we had an opportunity to really pivot and get out ahead of it. And we did very well in our responses to the community and how we handle calls for service. We're trying to get back to some of our counter services and some of our services that were changed over the last several months, 6 months really, to get those kicked back off. One of the questions I get asked probably more than any is about CCWs, concealed carry weapons permits, and where we are with that. That was one of the services we temporarily suspended for counter operations. We have put it back up. We're still behind, but we're catching back up. We're doing as best we can to get those going forward. If you're not aware, a CCW, concealed carry weapons permit, is what's required for somebody to carry a weapon concealed. A lot of our realtors have those permits because of the risks that you sometimes face by going into homes or dealing with people you may not know. That's perfectly legitimate reason to get one. We have about 14,000 CCWs issued in Orange County, and our approval rate is about 98%. So we are a pro Second Amendment county. I am a pro Second Amendment sheriff. In fact, I'm just a constitutional sheriff. I believe in the Constitution and what those privileges are. And you don't get to pick which ones you like and which ones you don't like. You have to equally love and support all of them. I'll cover another one in a minute. So COVID-19, we had some impacts early. We are really in a good position right now. We had some employees who had been impacted by COVID-19. 167 of I have just about 4,000 employees in the Sheriff's Department. We've had 167 who have tested positive for COVID-19, and a lot of our employees were actively being tested. So this isn't like the community where you may go get tested. All of our employees who worked at jails, for example, were actively being tested because of an outbreak that we had in the jail. And now we mitigated that down to 4. We have 4 employees who have COVID-19 today, and we have been blessed in that we haven't had anybody seriously hurt or injured. A couple went to the hospital, but they fully recovered and been released. We did have an outbreak in the jail about mid-March, and that actually escalated up to a high point of about 220 cases at one time, active cases within the jail. Total, we've had 537 active cases. As of today, we have 18 cases remaining, and 13 of those cases are from new bookings coming into the jail. These are people arrested by either the Sheriff's Department or municipal agency in the community and brought into Orange County Jail. And we have a process we put in place back in March on how to mitigate the risk of people bringing COVID-19 in and spreading about the jail. So we had our first outbreak. We started a process where we had those who were symptomatic. That was the CDC guidelines at the time. We would medically isolate them from the rest of the population. And of those who were medically isolated, about 40% of them actually had COVID. The rest of them, the 60%, were just sick. They had the flu or some other illness that we wanted to keep them away from the jail population. And then those who were medically or exposed to those who had COVID that we knew about, we were isolating them because of exposure within the jail. And then we had the quarantine of people coming in to the jail who are new bookings. So right now we have 5 of our inmates that we would call intra-facility transfer, those who within the jail who caught somebody else who was in the jail and moved about. And that was the 220 people I talked about a minute ago. We're actually down to 0 last week. We had a false negative test, and that allowed us to clear an inmate for general housing. And when he got cleared and then had symptoms, we realized we tested him again, and that individual did have COVID-19. So we had a slight little uptick, but we're working its way back down to 0 again. We're in a really, really good spot. Currently, we have 813 people quarantined within the jail, and we have 3,600 inmates. So that's a pretty significant number of people quarantined within the jail. A lot of the ways we did that was through releases. I made a decision to release some of our inmates a little bit early from their sentences. These are people that I created my own criteria. I think I shared this before, but if you haven't been in one of these Zoom OCR events with me, during a declared emergency by the government code, I have great latitude within the code to release people from the jail. And I didn't do that. I didn't just open up the doors and let people out. Identified those who were already sentenced, had no other holds, had no other holds, no other open cases, and they were all non-violent, non-serious, non-sex offenders. I didn't really release anybody who would be very, very at risk. Obviously, they're in jail because they had committed a criminal offense, But these people we let out about 30 up to 30 days early off their sentence. So we just didn't let everybody out. The state took a different approach, however, and they kind of had a blanket open door policy through the Judicial Council and some other ways that they could do that. And theirs is much more inclusive of people they were releasing out. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, California Department, CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation announced that they were going to release up to 16,700 prisoners from state prison up to a year early. And that's a pretty all-encompassing release of people that are going to probably have some impacts. To get to state prison in today's environment with all the law changes and decriminalization efforts, you've got to try pretty hard to get to state prison, unfortunately. And so for those who are there, they're very serious offenders. And if you look at Orange County's population, for example, Orange County's population is roughly 10%, 9% of the state's population. If you take that number, if that's 17,600 is a constant, about 1,700 of those prisoners are probably coming back to Orange County, and probably the vast majority of them coming to the greater Los Angeles area of Southern California. And these prisoners, I do know, do not know geographical borders. They oftentimes travel through other counties, cities to commit crime, which is part of this message I want to leave you with. I'm not trying to scare you. This is something we will have to deal with. And this is going to take our resources to go and address these people as they come back into the community, which may be a little bit of a drain on our resources. And with that said, what I'm asking you to do is don't become a target or easy victim of crime. And there's things that you can do to help mitigate those issues. For example, we just had a story that we put out in the media about 2 weeks ago through social media, and it made the news. It's picked up by some of the news stations about some of these professional criminals, if you will, that go through, distract you, use a diversionary tactic, distract you or observe you when you're not paying attention to your purse if it's in a shopping cart. You may turn to get something off the shelf and they're that quick. They're in your purse, grabbing your cell phone, your wallet, whatever it may be, and you will not even notice it's gone until you were at the front counter to check out and realize that you have been a victim of crime. One of the best ways to not be a victim of crime is whenever possible, these are the easy ones. If possible, lock your car in your garage at night. Make sure your vehicle is locked whenever you don't have it in there, your garage door closed. Always, never leave anything of value in plain sight in your car. That's probably one of the biggest ones. People will break your car to get in for loose change, a cell phone, anything that might have value to them to get into your car. And a burglar alarm is always a good one to have at your home that's monitored. And this is one of my favorites that I love, a locking side gate. If you don't have a locking side gate to your home, how commercial burglaries happen, which are down, residential burglaries, which are down right now because most people are home because of COVID. But when we get back to normal, people go back into the workplace, if they do, because I think we're learning new ways to work from home. But residential burglaries happening during the daytime, Monday through Friday, between about 9 and 3, where people will go ring your doorbell and you don't answer. They go to your side yard, the backyard, force entry into your home, and within about 5 minutes are in and out before you can even get somebody there. But a locking side gate is a deterrent because most people will not breach, go through or over a fence that will lock themselves into a backyard where they can't get away. So it's one more deterrent as well. And if you didn't know this, your car is twice as likely to be burglarized parked outside of your home and 4 times as likely to be burglarized away from your home. So you can greatly reduce that by just locking it in your garage at night and make it inaccessible to people as well. Let's see, I'm going through my train of thought here. Here's some of the vehicles. These are people that have been released as a result of the emergency bail schedule through the Judicial Council. We had 281 of them rearrested one time. These are of the 511 that were rearrested, of the 1,600 or so that were released according to the emergency bail schedule, which was 0 bail. Of the 1,600 plus released, 511 were rearrested, 280 were one time, 73 were arrested 2 times, 16 arrested 3 times. We had 1 person arrested 6 times. You can tell that there's this revolving door that just is taking place throughout our criminal justice system because of some of these early bail, no bail, early release issues. Most of those were for vehicle theft, which is the one crime that we have seen go up significantly during COVID. People going out and stealing cars, which is a big issue we've been facing for some time. I'm going to switch gears real quick. Let me just cover one more thing when I talked about COVID. And I shared this with you earlier several months ago, and it's even more true today when we look at what we're dealing with within the community. When we were dealing with our COVID outbreak and we were medically quarantining people who had been exposed, which I can do in my jail. I have a captive audience, if you will, and we follow where they go because we have RFID cards. So when we go back for contact tracing, for me, it's easy. Somebody had it in one of our housing locations, all these other people will house with him or her, and it's easy to identify who was there, and we can quarantine those people. This is back when, per CDC guidelines, if you were going to test, you had to have symptomology. You had to have flu-like symptoms, a cough, a fever, and then it would give you a test. Well, inside the jail, we tested everybody. In fact, almost every inmate has been tested within our jail. But what we realized is when we were following the CDC guidelines for testing, when we got to day 12 of everybody being quarantined, we tested everybody before we released them back into the jail's general population. And about 85% of those people who were quarantined and asymptomatic, meaning they didn't have any symptomology that would require them to get a CDC test, 85% of them were positive. They're positive asymptomatic. And I shared this back probably 3 or 4 months ago about what I believe we were going to learn about COVID in the community, that there will be a lot of people more than likely getting exposed because people weren't staying home or using the safe precautions, and probably moving about and contaminating other people and getting this out. And if you saw the second wave that happened of COVID that we just are now starting to get over, it was more than likely people who were unknowingly asymptomatic positive and going out in the community and infecting people. And some of these people have significant risks. They're either elderly or may have pre-existing medical conditions, that at-risk population that more than likely is not going to fare as well as somebody who's healthy, which is why we have to follow some of the recommended guidelines that I think have been stressed time and time again. I've talked about masks before. I have a perspective on masks. Mine is both a professional position and one I think that's just a reasonable position. I wear a mask when I'm out in public. My wife does, my friends do. If I have to go out, I'm always wearing a mask. If I go to eat, I'll sit down and follow the other hygiene guidelines. But I've never said that masks aren't important. What I have said is I do not believe mask compliance is a responsibility of law enforcement to make sure happens. If you look at what we've gone through the last 3 months with all the civil unrest and calls for social justice and reform, the last thing that I would see my responsibility as a sheriff and that of my deputies is to go out and physically arrest people for not wearing a mask. We've got much bigger issues to overcome in this country right now than to going out and being the mask police and at times physically arresting somebody who doesn't want to wear a mask. That said, I will tell you this also. I've had several people call me complaining about, I'll use the words, the violation of their constitutional rights because they went into a grocery store not wearing a mask and they wouldn't let them shop there. That is, I don't know if you've, in civics, if you remember the Constitution, there's no constitutional right to go shopping in a grocery store. That is a privilege that you're allowed to, and it's private property. You have to follow the rules of the establishment. If the manager of that store, say it's a Ralph's, says, you need to wear a mask, and they say, I'm not going to wear one, well, then you need to leave. No, I want to shop. That's called trespassing. That's a different violation of law that is enforceable, and we will go out and address that. For the most part, we've been able to get good compliance out of people by educating them and trying to get people back in a good spot. But it's going to take a team effort to get through all this, and I think we're back in the right place moving forward. When it comes on the topic of police reform, I can't remember the last time I spoke to your group. I apologize. I think Dorissy would know, because I know she's here because she always is, but she would know. It's probably been about 2 months. And so she'll let me know probably in the date in the chat section in just a second. But through all this, when we're dealing with police reform, and this is what I think this is what I love about Orange County and Southern California law enforcement that I have come to realize for some years. I've had the privilege of going to nationally recognized training, both at Harvard University, Boston, back in DC at Quantico with the FBI and some other really highly recognized high-level training. And it took me about 15 minutes every time I was back there and I talked to my peers across the country to find out how far ahead Southern California is in law enforcement, in policy, in practices, in tactics, in hiring. We are just ahead of the curve. I hear what they are dealing with, and we're not dealing with any of those things. But what bothers me a little bit when I hear some of these advocates come out and say, this is what, Sheriff, this is what you have to do. You need to do these things. And one of those was, if you're unfamiliar, 8 can't wait. You have to do these 8 things have to be done. And I read the 8 things and I said, you know what, I read them and I agree. That's why we did every one of those things years ago. None of those issues that you're bringing to Orange County are issues that we are facing. We've already moved way beyond that. I had a Zoom meeting a few months ago, and there's a person who was advocating for a position, and that's okay. I'm not offended by that, but I'm offended by the lack of knowledge the person has and what the real issues are. And they said there's no accountability in law enforcement. That is also not true. I can understand why somebody would believe that, because that message that we sometimes share doesn't make it into the media, mainstream media, and they don't carry it. But if I were to tell you that in 2019, the Orange County Sheriff's Department had almost 357,000 contacts with the public, and of the 357,000 contacts, only 421 resulted in a use of force. That is extremely low on a national comparative basis. And our definition of force is very inclusive. It includes anything beyond merely handcuffing somebody. So if I had to Chip and I were out in public and I had to take an enforcement action on Chip, and I had to control him in some way, that would be considered a use of force. That number, by the way, that's 118 uses of force per every 100,000 contacts with the public. It is extremely low when it comes to use of force. And about accountability also, when that same message came up, in 2019, the Sheriff's Department had 126 internal affairs investigations that we conducted on almost 200 members of our department. And when I tell people that, I think the presumption is, well, yeah, people come to you and they bring you complaints. Of those 126 cases, 84% of the cases were my staff recognizing and identifying conduct that we did not believe rose to good behavior. We started those investigations on our own without the public bringing them to our attention. So we do hold our people accountable, and we will walk people out of this profession if necessary, if they don't meet our standards of compliance. The last thing that we dealt with through the last several months is this movement to defund the police. It's been happening repeatedly. Defund the police, and these people have these opinions. The issue about defunding the police is not a defund the police issue. The issue is fund the social programs that don't exist that would prevent some of these things from landing on the shoulders of law enforcement to deal with. My jail is, before COVID-19, had about 5,400, 5,600, 5,700 inmates in there. And 40% of them have a daily nexus to mental health treatment. That's 1,950 to 2,000 inmates every day having a nexus to some form of mental health treatment, either through there being acute or some smaller issue that requires their attention. That's a huge number to have to deal with. It's a 60% increase in 5 years. These people are mentally ill. They sometimes create minor law violations, sometimes serious law violations, because there's no intervention strategy to deal with them. So I'm an advocate for getting the right services in place, but that's not my responsibility to fund. That's a state responsibility to fund. So we have to fund these intervention programs to keep people who are mentally ill or out of homelessness or out of substance use disorder issues, so that we can keep them out of the criminal justice system, treat them appropriately before they come to jail. While I have them, I've got great programs to treat them while they're here, and they're aimed at getting them into mental health stability, or into sobriety, or into homes if they are homeless before they walk out of the jail for maintenance going forward, so they don't reviolate and come back. That's my responsibility I have while they're here, but I'd rather them not come to me in the first place if we can keep them out of the system in some other way. By the way, I have 120, on average, about 100 to 120 people who are detoxing out of alcohol and or drugs at any given moment, which is why we have a medically supervised detox unit within the jail. And if you heard of the term medicine-assisted treatment or medication-assisted treatment, MAT, we've implemented that well over a year ago. I've got 550 people in my jail on MAT at the tune of $2 million plus a year that comes out of my budget to help keep them, to wean them off of and keep them off of opioids, which is a great and serious issue that we're facing as a society today. So probably the last thing I'll talk about real quick, and I'm looking at my watch, I think I'm almost nearing the 30-minute mark, is legislation that's going to be impactful against just in law enforcement. There's this huge wave for social justice reform through the legislature. Today is their last day to pass bills before they go to the governor for his approval or veto, depending on what he chooses to do. There are some very significant bills that are being entertained, and some of them are very poorly drafted. And I say that not to be critical of our legislators in either the Assembly or the Senate, but some of them are looking at this, the unfortunate tragedy that happened in Minneapolis as this opportunity to get this legislation through based on opportunism. That's not good public policy. That's not the way we should be passing laws. It should be done thoughtfully, looking at impacts, looking at what we're all hopefully trying to accomplish as a society, not just to do these things on a whim. And some of these things are being done on a whim, and they're going to be significantly impactful upon our ability to do our job and to keep our communities safe. Through the last, we'll cover real quick through the last several months when we're dealing with protesters, the Sheriff's Department, we responded to over 50 protests in support, thousands of deputies that were sent out there. We have a very simple message and strategy. I won't tell you all of it because I don't want to bore you, but we do have a way to reach out and be inclusive, always aimed at protecting the First Amendment rights. I mentioned being a sheriff who supports the Constitution. This is the truest test of your word when you have people, our deputies, out there protecting the First Amendment rights to peaceably assemble when they're protesting against us. That's important to be able to walk the talk and say, we believe in your right to peacefully protest. The key word though, and in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, is to peaceably assemble. It doesn't mean you get together and throw rocks and bottles and break windows and steal and burn cars. That's not peaceably assembling. If you want to get together all day long, and you can say whatever you want, I have no problem with that. In fact, I'll be honest, it gives me a little sense of pride when people can feel that they have the ability to go out and peaceably assemble and share a message that I may not agree with, but they should be able to be heard in doing that. There's some bills I think that are necessary. SB 731 is about qualified immunity and creates a decertification process. It's not a good crafted bill. We support a different bill. I think that's much better. It's AB 1299, which is post officer separation and internal affairs investigations that it requires an agency to complete an internal affairs investigation. Somebody can't resign in lieu of termination and then go get hired somewhere else. And I'm a big advocate for that one. One bill that might be the most impactful on the way that we provide services within our jails is SB 555. This was a bill, it became a 2-year bill. Last year was brought back up and brought back to the floor. It actually changes the inmate welfare fund. If you're not familiar with what an inmate welfare fund is, it's basically an enterprise fund. It funds itself and it funds programs that are used exclusively for the benefit of inmates entrusted to our care. And they want to change the funding mechanism that will take it almost down to zero. It'll make it impossible for this fund to exist because it exists off of telephone revenue and also commissary sales, candy bars and other things sold through commissary. And if it changes the cost structure, there won't be a vendor who will be able to be in this business to provide the telephone services that we have to provide. I don't know how we'll provide telephone services, and commissary sales basically says if I sell something in commissary, I have to sell it at no more than 10% over the cost, which is not something we can do because our overhead won't allow that. So all the programs that go into the jail for education and drug programs and parenting classes and everything that we provide for those inmates, we won't provide anymore because there won't be a mechanism to fund that. I don't have the money within my budget to pay for that, which is why there's this proprietary use fund, an enterprise fund that's used only for the benefit of the inmates. Every dollar they or their loved ones spend for them to make a phone call or to get commissary goes right back into them and not used for any other purpose. In fact, by law, I can't use that money for anything other than the inmate welfare. There's other bills as well, but I won't go through all of them. I think I'm a little bit over half an hour, Chip. So if you want to, if there are any questions for me, I'm happy to take those.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much. I'm getting so many compliments here, Sheriff Barnes. But yeah, we do have one question. Early on, you spoke about the cases of COVID in your sheriff's department and in the jail. And one of the attendees asked, has anyone died from it?
No, we have not had any fatalities, either of staff, nor have we from inmates. There are people who are advocates who want to just take information, try to use it for their benefit. There was I think a story that was out in the Register that said, 4 people have died in jail, and how do we know it wasn't from COVID? Well, there's no indicator that it was from COVID. One of them, for example, was terminally ill from cancer and died in our hospital ward. So there's all these assertions being made about some of these cases, but we have nobody went to the hospital because of COVID and passed away, and nobody, we believe, there's no indicator that anything is COVID related based on some of the unfortunate deaths we have. This is a very large jail system, and I think people, some of these advocacy groups, they're really anti-incarceration groups. They don't want jails to exist at all. And they take this position that when somebody dies, it is by default preventable. That's not the case. These people aren't dying because they're in jail. They're dying while they're in jail by some other condition. For example, we had an individual who passed away last year, and it became a big media issue. And I had a good idea what it was, and it turned out that he had passed away from a fentanyl overdose. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that's 50 times more potent than heroin. It's a huge issue for the nation. It's being trafficked into the country from both China and through Mexico. Of course, we have the Mexico border closest to us, so that's how it's coming over the border. And we're seizing it by the pound. Our seizures of fentanyl are going up significantly. And I have a drug trafficking problem as a result of AB 109, which is State Prison Realignment for 2011. My drug trafficking into my jail went up 300% in the first 2 years because of the criminal enterprise that exists within the jail. And last year we had 70 saves of inmates who overdosed on fentanyl. I have an naloxone program. Naloxone is an opioid antagonist. It's kind of like Narcan, but it's a nasal spray. My deputies have been carrying it for years, and they carry it within the jail. Last year we had 70 saves. So we saved 70 people's lives while they were getting access to trafficked fentanyl within the jail and save their lives. That's a huge win for us. And those saves, by the way, are going significantly every year. This individual from last year who was his family is suing our department. Unfortunately, he did not get saved. It's an unfortunate outcome, but we did not. He got access to fentanyl because he had a drug addiction issue. Here's the irony, though. When we went through COVID-19, when we locked our jails down and we weren't taking new bookings and everything kind of froze for about a 3-month period, guess how many fentanyl overdoses we had in the jail?
Zero.
We went to zero because the drug trafficking aspect of it was declined down to nothing. They couldn't get access to it anymore. And now, because the bookings are starting back up, we're starting to see people trying to traffic it back in again. But that's we can anticipate happening, unfortunately. I've done a lot of things to stop that. We have drug detection canines in the jail, narcotics dogs that can track those drugs. We stopped receiving card stock in the jail because oftentimes card stock would be laced with some narcotic. They take, for example, a birthday card and they dip it in liquid methamphetamine, let it dry, and then mail it in, and then they could ingest this and get high. So this is a huge criminal enterprise that exists within our criminal justice system, in our jails and prison system that takes place. It's unfortunate, but it is. But we've got, I'm proud of the program. I'm very proud of our deputies who work in custody operations, who for many months knowingly went into an environment that had a surge in COVID cases. And they came to work every day knowing they're walking into a dangerous and exposed environment to do their job. At one point, our staff, because our inmate population was down, and we have workers, inmate workers who actually do the cleaning and things like that, our inmate workers were impacted. We had a period of time where our staff, our deputies, the deputy sergeants, were actually making the meals for the inmates every day. They would come in and make all the meals for them, so we could provide for the inmates entrusted to our care. If you can't imagine the grace and humility it takes for staff to come in and go, we have to get this work done. It's going to take us to get together, and we're going to pull together as a team to do that. It speaks volumes for the professionalism and level of care that they put into their job, and I couldn't be prouder of them.
Oh, thanks so much,
I
Sheriff.
hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, you did. You definitely did. You definitely did. Yes, nobody has passed away from COVID. Yeah, Sheriff. The next question is a pretty comprehensive one. Is with the upcoming presidential election and all of the previous unrest and animosity towards the current administration, what steps is your department taking? And more importantly, how should we as realtors / citizens prepare for what may occur in our communities?
Is there an election coming up? That's a joke. Yeah, so it's unfortunate that I think our country has become so divided on the extremes, and that's probably one of the most unfortunate things about how great this country is, that we can get so separated on issues in politics, and not only this political issue. What we've done in the department, or what we are doing, is we can anticipate that there will be the high probability of having some level of protest, or maybe even manifestation into civil unrest, depending how the election goes. I'm gonna say if one person wins, there will be. If another person wins, there won't be. I just think the environment right now is just so strained that we can probably anticipate having some type of response, regardless, just getting through the second Tuesday of November. I have what's called a sheriff's response team. These are individuals who are trained in crowd control techniques. These are the people that you would see out in the public with the helmets and wearing the gear. They do that for their protection, but they're trained in, first of all, in professionalism, and also in restraint, knowing how to accomplish peace by getting people to be voluntary compliant, but also how to identify those who may be antagonists or troublemakers, if you will, and remove them from a crowd peaceably so that they can maintain a peaceful protest. So we are actually training up 2 additional platoons of sheriff's response team personnel. That's another 100 deputy sheriffs that would be available to go out and assist. Most of our responses are not always in sheriff's jurisdiction. As you know, with the 10 cities of South Orange County and Yorba Linda, Stanton, and Villa Park are patrolled by the sheriff's department. The 10 cities being Lake Forest and down to the San Diego border. I won't go through all of them, all their entirety. But it's important to know that, because we have a countywide responsibility to go and assist other agencies. So if Santa Ana or Anaheim or Huntington Beach, when they were having their protests, oftentimes we were there as a response contingent. But it's not as we have enough to be responsive, and we have plenty, but we can get overwhelmed pretty quickly. So when we look at national protests that happen, that's a big strain on the resources, because oftentimes through mutual aid, we may be requested to go to Los Angeles and help. And we can only go there if we don't have something happening here in Orange County, because we have an Orange County responsibility. So all those things, I think, weigh heavy on us. I think that we are watching carefully to see how this unfolds. The one advantage we do have here in Orange County is we have our own intelligence assessment center. So Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center. It's a terrorism fusion center that's really turned into all crimes, all hazards. So it used to be, after 9/11, we had the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Terrorism Early Warning Group. That was a precursor to the fusion center system. In fact, when 9/11 happened, there were only 3 terrorism early warning groups in the entire nation. New York City, Los Angeles, and Orange County. Little Orange County is right there as one of the startups. We were a pioneer in this and got out ahead of it, which is why we have our own fusion centers. 80 fusion centers in the nation. In 2018, Orange County is recognized as Fusion Center of the Year, which is a prestigious award that we've received. We're the only fusion center in California ever recognized with that. But they will go through and actively seek out open source information, tips and leads and information they bring in. They validate it into intelligence and put it back out for analytical product to the benefit of Orange County, Southern California, California, the nation. For example, if you remember a few years ago, there was an assault that took place back, I think it was South Carolina or North Carolina, and this group called Rise Against, the Rise Against movement. It was Orange County's Fusion Center that identified the 4 individuals from the East Coast. It was our Fusion Center that identified those 4 individuals and turned them over, their identities over to the FBI for prosecution. So it's not just local benefit. It has, they do work, and it's where the intelligence takes them. Is where they bring that. So we have the benefit of having our own Fusion Center, so we can track information that's happening throughout the area. And then we have the benefit of adding additional personnel as well. And that's always important to have those 2 things. So we're tracking everything. My hope is that we can have a certain degree of civility that will take place through this, so that we're not just acting out on the extremes. That's the important part. And whatever does happen, I hope that people can realize that this is what makes this country great, is the ability to vote, cast your votes. When the votes come out, whoever wins, regardless of what your political affiliation, you just get behind this country and support the president, whoever that may be. And that's probably the most important part I would leave with.
Amen. I totally agree with that. Thank you so much, Sheriff. Next question goes into the Ring doorbell. And this is from our esteemed Education Committee member, Scott White. Do the Ring type doorbells really deter the daytime burglars and porch pirates?
I would tell you that they are, I think they're a great deterrent. I think they're also beneficial as an evidentiary tool, that if something does happen, I don't know if they deter people from stealing things off the porch, because we record people on Ring doorbell of them stealing things off the porch. I think if they're motivated to do it, they're just going to do it. I think there are other avenues now. If you're getting something that's being delivered that is of value, that you don't want to run the risk of not getting. Amazon, by the way, has pickup centers now. They can go to a pickup center, just as 1 step, you have to go get it. Right now, a lot of people are at home and have the ability to immediately go out and pick something up off the porch, or you can have a neighbor get it for you. A lot of these, Amazon, for example, will tell you your package was just delivered. You get a notification that it was delivered. You can sometimes get it, but if they're following the Amazon truck, you're probably going to beat your neighbor to get it off the front porch, or sometimes even you. So I think there is a certain sense of deterrent in there. I think there's an evidentiary tool that takes place. The quicker you can get information off of that video and share it with us about the theft, it's important. Everybody knows that if a porch pirate steals something, you're probably going to be able to call the vendor and say, something was stolen off my porch, would you send me another one? And they absorb that cost, and they don't report it. Please report it. The way we solve these things and deter them is going out and catching these people. And when you may have a Ring doorbell that records somebody coming up, but your neighbor may have a exterior camera that recorded the car and the license plate. So all these things we put together into a case, and we're really good about going out and catching these people. So don't, if you find something, it's a old adage, if you see something, say something. Please call it in and report it so we can start to build a case, or at least start patrolling for these people and catching them.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Now, these first of all, people are giving you kudos as opposed to asking you questions about what a great job you're doing. So have to give you that. Also, this is about 3 or 4 questions that are pertaining to CCW, and mainly the gist of it is, have you seen an uptick in arising from gun owners who made purchases during the pandemic, like any accidents, more crime? People are wondering, I guess they joined late, what is your stance on CCW? And then, yeah, that's pretty much, talk about CCW.
Sure. First, let me just thank everybody. I'm not reading I don't have the chat up, so I'm not reading the accolades. I will tell you, when people tell me that we're doing a good job, I will tell you it's simple for me. I'm blessed. I've got a great team. I'm fortunate to have to work with the people I have to work with, and I couldn't be prouder of the organization. When it comes to CCWs, yes, I am a Second Amendment advocate. I believe strongly in it. If you have an interest in getting a CCW, it's online at ocsd.org. It comes up on the front page. You click a button that says CCW application, and it will take you to a page that tells you all the processes and how to apply. We got a little behind because of COVID-19 because we couldn't do the in-person, face-to-face interviews during that time, but we have, I think, pivoted a little bit since then. We're doing as much as we can via online, email, telephone, however else to get as much done as possible. So I believe in that. As far as the numbers goes, the height that we had in CCW issuance happened about a year or so ago. It was about 15,000. And through attrition, people sometimes just lose interest. It went down to about 13,500. We're back in the 14,000 range. And most of those are conditioned upon what's happening in the nation. So we start seeing the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, you couldn't buy ammo or gun anywhere. Everything got absorbed and bought up. And that's just the way that things happen. There's an ebb and flow beyond what people perceive to be the risk, I think, of having that. But I think it's an easy process to go through. We have to follow state law. State law requires an applicant to have a good cause, a stated good cause. That's not my law. It's not my rule. It's California law, and it has to be beyond just a self-defense. That might work in a very rural county like San Bernardino when they can justify an extended response. That doesn't exist in a county like Orange. And I say that because although I'd love to just say if you qualify, you get one, I know the state is looking closely at CCWs, and they're looking for any opportunity probably to come down and challenge me specifically in my program because we have issued so many. So I don't want to give them the excuse to come down and take away a good program from us. I will tell you this, Chip, and this is the irony in how the state was operating through COVID. The state, if you look what's happening about evictions, a moratorium on evictions, and all these safeguards put in place, and extensions of licenses and everything else. I was talking to the Attorney General, and I asked him, if we're looking at impacts because of COVID on government and processes and licenses, can we get a 4 or 6 month extension on CCWs so that we can get caught up? And it fell on deaf ears. So when it comes to something that is, I think, politically separated or contrary to what a political opinion is, there's just no support for that. And it's unfortunate because I think that would have been a fair and reasonable thing to do when you look at the impacts and what we have to do now to get caught up. If you do have one, if you have a CCW, please get your renewal application in early enough. I know they won't let you put it in 6 months early. I think they have a time frame, but at least get it in, because once you get it in, it's not a renewal. It's not a new application. It stays as a renewal, and we'll get it caught up as quickly as we can. I wish I had the legal ability just to extend it. I don't. Unfortunately, that's what the state is not willing to compromise on.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Now, this is from our wonderful and amazing Derissy. Yeah, you knew she was here. She's been here the whole time.
She's everywhere.
Oh, Derissy, yeah, Derissy's everywhere. She's awesome. She wants you to talk about Prop 20.
Prop 20 is it's a proposition that's made the ballot. It was a ballot initiative brought forth by signatures. It is I think the name changed a little bit. It was Keeping California Safe Act is the general preface of Prop 20. It's something that I can't advocate for. I can tell you what it is because I'm in uniform. I can take a position. But Prop 20 undoes some of the harms that were created because of Prop 47. It redefines property crime in a way that you have serial thefts. They can be prosecuted as a felony. Right now, because the way the law changed regarding Prop 47, there was a decriminalization effort that happened on two fronts. Redesignation of a lot of drug crimes that made them misdemeanors, and also property crimes were reclassified as misdemeanors. The two categories of crime that law enforcement inevitably deals with, regardless of where you are in the country, is property crime and drug crime. And taking those two large categories and reclassifying them down to misdemeanors did not have the intended outcome I think that the state was hoping to have. It didn't result in any lesser crime. What it resulted is less people going to state prison, which was really the impetus for that that proposition. How do we keep people from going to state prison so we can reduce the state prison population down, but at the expense of the communities and their safety? So if you look at, for example, the decriminalization effort on narcotics violations, it didn't make narcotics violations any less. People didn't seek to go get treatment because of the effort put forth. In fact, it did the opposite. And that's why we're seeing drug trafficking go through the roof. We're seeing a lot of drugs come across the border from Mexico into the United States. Methamphetamine is still the largest trafficked drug into this country from south of the border. Fentanyl, I shared earlier, is replacing heroin as the opioid of choice because nobody wants just straight heroin anymore when you get something much more powerful. The one drug that's not being trafficked over the border in great quantity anymore is marijuana, because now you can grow it here domestically. In fact, the cartels are still controlling that marijuana trade by having grows within Southern California. They're not going to give up the profit of that business just because we made it a domestically approved product. Still illegal, still illegal. It's been decriminalized in California, but still not a legal drug from the federal government on the federal schedule of narcotics. So we're still dealing with those two things. The other about the property crimes. Before Prop 47 went into place in 2014, if you went into a Target and stole with intent of stealing something, that was commercial burglary, and you could go potentially to state prison for that. You go into Target now, it's with intent to steal something, $950 or less than $950, we write you a ticket and say, go to court in 30 days. That's why there's such an impact on commerce that's happened over the last several years because of the changes. This undoes that and also reclassifies more appropriately in the penal code what a violent crime is. Categorically in the penal code, there are, it defines what a violent crime is. And for the ladies on the line here today, if I were to ask you, is rape of an unconscious person a violent crime? I think everybody would raise their hand and say, absolutely, not in the penal code. The definition of violent crimes in the penal code is very, very narrow, which they don't want to redefine because if it becomes more inclusive, people don't get released, they have to go to state prison and be accountable for the crimes they do commit. So it deals predominantly with those two. It doesn't really deal with the narcotics part of it. It deals with serial crimes, serial thefts, and also redefining what a violent crime is in the penal code. It's a Keeping California Safe Act is Prop 20. And I think it's a very, very important piece of corrective legislation being brought forth through proposition.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Well, Sheriff, I'll tell you, we don't have any more questions. Just again, I'll tell you there are a lot of kudos there. And just want to thank you for your time. And as I said, I'll say it in front of everybody. You were so our whole week is a success now. I want to thank my education committee and of course, Cassie, Sabrina, and Tiffany, and Dave at OC Realtors. And I just want to, all of you out there, tomorrow is going to be awesome. So make certain that you avail yourself. 10 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to have emergency physician Jim Keeney, and he's going to give us a look from the medical perspective of COVID-19 in Orange County. So, oh, and also somebody won a tremendous gift for today, but the person who starts today and goes all the way through Friday, attending every one of the meetings, you win a huge gift that Sheriff Barnes just talked about. He talked about the Ring doorbell. They're gonna have that and a locking system. So thank you so much again. We appreciate you, Sheriff Barnes. I can't wait I've seen you in person, but I've never met you in person. Can't wait to meet you.
I can't wait to see you. Well, actually, I can't wait to see everybody in person sometime soon. I think we're all ready to get back out and enjoy the great Orange County community a little bit more than we have been. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with your group. I always appreciate the invitation from OCR, and wish you all the best. And as we're talking before, it's a seller's market. Good luck to all of you in your sales. Good luck.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.